Welcome to another Dragon Firesides. I have a special guest today, Dr. Jordan Barber. Usually, Dr. Jordan, I like to let my guests introduce themselves just so I don't miss anything. Can you tell us a bit about your origin story?
Cool. You have about 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
No, the origin story. Well, first, doctor of acupuncture and Oriental medicine from AOMA. So that's the advanced practice clinical doctorates. I was dumb or smart enough, haven't decided yet to do the 3-year version of the doctorates instead of the quicker one. Um, but other than that, my focus is in pain, specific subspecialties, pelvic floor dysfunction. I've been licensed since 2007. Before that, I was a body worker. And before that, my life was much like the movie Office Space. And I was in IT. I went through 9/11 and through a series of fortunate but unfortunate events at that moment. I found Chinese medicine and I haven't looked back.
Very good.
The
Very good.
shortest I've ever done that, David, I have to tell
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
You're also an author?
I am. So they tell me I get to put that on all the bylines at this point. And actually, as my PR team has told me, best-selling author because I ranked one day on Amazon. So we won't let that go. I did write a book called Realigning Medicine, which is a book on successful clinical practice for kind of the solo allied practitioner. So I write it as an acupuncturist, but it works for anyone that's basically in that same service model, right? If you're a nurse practitioner, a medical doctor, you're in a different model. It's probably not going to be as applicable. But if you're a massage therapist, a social worker, anyone that's doing kind of a solo-based one-on-one or small group practice, um, it's the stuff from my experience. It's kind of a workbook, but I really wrote it because I was teaching practice management at the time, and I got tired of saying all the basics. And I said, "Here, read the book." So ADHD took hold, and I wrote a book. Um,
Amazing.
we also have a book coming out on May 19th. So probably by the time this is out, it'll be out. And that's called Thinking in Chinese Medicine. I wrote that with Dr. Peter Karen. And that one is completely different. And that's on the thought process of Chinese medicine. We realized that there's no book out there to A, hand a patient, B, hand a medical doctor or a referral source to say, hey, this is what we're doing. It's without the woo, right? So it translates to anyone. It's just the brass tacks of how we think clinically and how we approach things clinically. And it really came from the fact that we didn't have a book to give those patients. So there was like the Web That Has No Weaver. That's like 20
Right.
something years old, 30 years old. And then there was between what's Fire and Ice, I think, right? The 5 Element book, which is also great.
Hmm.
But that stuff gets so into everything. So
Right.
it's like we didn't want to get into all the details. This is the liver channel and does that. We just want to say, hey, this is what that clinical practice, clinical kind of model looks like. This is how we're doing things. This is why we change things. Here's like the mindset. So we're excited about that book. We'll see what happens.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. And if anybody wants to reach out or get your books or talk to you,
Books are everywhere books are sold. I love saying that. Sounds really professional. So you can find them anywhere. And then reaching out to me, I'm pretty findable. I'm on all social medias. I do dislike social media, but I understand the utility of them. So you could find me on there. I just might take a day to respond. But otherwise, you can find me on any of my sites and just reach out.
very cool. So we have some things in common in our background. I too had a technical chapter. Well, now I mean, essentially, I have a marketing agency and a software company. But back in the day, I went to school for computer engineering, and then that many years later, I went to acupuncture school in Austin. We were rivals with AOMA, Texas College of Traditional Chinese Medicine. It's called Texas Health and Science University now, I think.
Yeah.
You were in Austin for your degree, I'm assuming?
So yeah, I was in Austin for the doctorates. Now I did my master's in New York at New York College of at the time holistic medicine. I think it's something medicine. I don't even know what it's called anymore. You know, all these schools keep changing. And then I did a post doctoral program that was supposed to be a pilot program for a doctoral in New York at Tri-State, which is no longer around. And that was in orthopedics. And then I did my doctorates in Austin. So I would fly down there and go back and forth. And yeah, I love Austin. Honestly, it's the only place I would live other than New York
Yeah,
and
it's
Italy.
an oasis in Texas. I'll say that, but
Yeah,
it's an amazing town for sure.
I miss it dearly. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Well, to kick it off, I'm interested in these books that you've written because they cover both of the things that we tend to focus on this podcast. And one of them is about the medicine. You mentioned that the book that you're releasing is without the woo. One of the trends that I've been noticing is that kind of in a semi-desperate, seems a little desperate attempt to have acceptance in the Western medical community. A lot of practitioners are moving further and further away from woo and talking about the energetics of the practice in, to something that's more like mechanism of action focused or something like that. Something that's, uh, I feel like it dumbs it down a little bit. That's just my opinion. I'm not a practitioner. So, you how do you typically, first of all, your general feeling about the efficacy of acupuncture and how it works and all of that kind of stuff. If you were to give an unfiltered answer to that question, do you describe it in terms of energetics or do you describe it in terms of physiology or how do you approach that?
It depends on who I'm talking with, right? So you have the term code switching, right? I'm not going to talk about energetics to someone who's not going to have a clue what I'm talking about. And it's just going to devalue the conversation when I'm trying to communicate because we communicate and we talk to express something and for it to be received. So if I'm just talking about weird stuff and they're like, I don't know what you're saying, that sounds cool. Well, what's the point? One of my things is I'm a diehard classicist, yet most of the stuff that comes out of my mouth sounds Western. And that's because I'm so diehard a classicist that I see no difference between medicine, right? Medicine that works is medicine that works. So I can explain why the Huatou Jiaji points work from, segmental effect and, you know, um, how it affects different receptors there and neurological principles. We talk about gate theory, whatever, but I could also talk from an energetic standpoint of the Dumai and everything else. I don't think they conflict. That's the thing. It's if you understand the medicine, well, of course there's a scientific plausible thing that's occurring because, well, we exist in a reality. It's just a language set that we use. So, and I do understand what you're saying where it's like, well, it kind of devalues it. It devalues it when you use it in a way that that stuff is BS, that the woo is BS. And the woo is not BS. It's a way of communicating. It's a language set. Um, and there's a lot of things that have not necessarily called quantum. I'm not an expert in quantum anything, but there's a lot of things that are expressed in our language set of Chinese medicine that we don't necessarily have the verbiage or the science yet to fully get in there. We can maybe get in microtubules of the brains and phasing in and out of reality. I don't know. That sounds really weird. And I don't know it enough to talk about it, but that's where our language set is really good. But on a normal conversation with a referral source, like a PT who's sending me a patient with back pain, talking about the kidney tree, that's great. Can you get them out of pain? That's all they know. And at the end of the day, when you talk about a transaction life cycle, there's a reason why someone's come to you. Can you help me with the thing I have? The answer should be yes, not a discourse on magic energy. So that's my view on it. That's a long diatribe.
Oh,
And also I could cite the classics on this, but I'll keep it away. But yeah.
I think that's an excellent answer. I think you need to know your audience and who you're talking to, and there's something that I reference on the podcast sometimes is that there's an overall feeling that I have with a lot of the practitioners that I talk to that um, because we're sort of medical community adjacent in terms of how we're licensed and credentialed, that because we don't have MDs after our decrees and things that we're not allowed access to certain tables or certain conversations, and so we're sort of playing the role of the redheaded stepchild of the medical community. There's the insecurity about you have to overemphasize um and demand acceptance in some ways for what we do, even though it's a much more comprehensive system. It's got a much longer history, and obviously the results speak for themselves. Trying to squeeze that into the West and have a conversation with an MD is something that you know can be contentious, and so I think a lot of people fall into this pattern of defensiveness when it comes to speaking about it.
So you hit the nail on the head on a few things. One, imposter syndrome's huge, right? When you get out into the real world, it's like, oh my God, like, how do I talk to this person? You know, because we're not trained to work side by side. We say we're integrative. That's complete BS, right? We know what the schooling's like. You know, I mean, AOMA was great. I don't know about the rival school if you guys had stuff, but you know, they had relationships with the VA and other stuff out there. So you had opportunities to network. But yeah, you're always on the periphery. And that's a scope issue as well, being on the periphery, because we don't necessarily have full systems level access. We're actually not even in the systems-based care, right? We're outside. There's no referral line. However, a piece of my backstory is I grew up as a punk rocker in New York, right? So I grew up through the 90s punk rock scene, St. Mark's Place and everything else. So I've always had this rebellious spirit. Um, I refuse to not be allowed a seat at the table. And I think that's everyone's right. Now, how you
Yeah.
want to go about that is up to you. My relationships that I have built with the people that are part of now my community of care for my patients are incredible people that no longer see me as the acupuncturist. They might not fully understand everything I do because they're confused. And that's okay. That maybe it's me not communicating it effectively, but they know that I'm serious, that I understand the subject from multiple angles and I can communicate. And at the end of the day, I truly care about the outcomes of the patients. So when you start demanding that acceptance and you show that you're serious, people do pay attention, but it is a battle and you have to fight. And that's unfortunate because you don't get told that when you sign up for your student loans, when you go into school that, hey, listen, you're going to be fighting the entire time to be accepted. So I agree, but I also say, you know, our medicine's strong enough to fight back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. Um, in terms of where we're positioned inside of the medical community at large and everything that's been going on, call it post COVID, with sort of a loss of faith in our institutions, um, questions being answered. You know, you have the what is it? The Make America Healthy Again, the Maha movement, and all of these kinds of things. Do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like a dumb question, but do you feel like our the importance of what acupuncturists do, the onus is higher now than it used to be to actually offer solutions to people that don't feel like they have anywhere to look, because you know it's a totally commoditized profession when you go to see, you know, your primary care physician and you get 5 minutes with them and they're doing identical prescriptions for everybody that comes in, and there's financial incentives for them to do things a certain way and all of this stuff. um, how do you regard sort of the mantle that is placed on us in terms of the responsibility that comes with it?
So twofold. I mean, one, the data's there. I mean, I think it was Fox Boston. I was on with 3 weeks ago or so, and then another like long form podcast where they were focusing on us Gen Z specifically because they've been through so many different things, are really they've lost a distrust in standard medicine. They also want very personalized medicine, which is what Chinese medicine does. You know,
Mhm.
I think the phrase I said is they want it as personalized as their Spotify list, right? They want it to be they want to be seen and heard because their diseases are more complex. They're stress oriented. They're chronic. They're not like they don't check off all the boxes on things, right? So there is a large movement even from the younger generations. Um, but there is also that distrust in the system, like you talk about. For us as practitioners, we just have to do what we've always done. And I think that's what we forget because so the one thing I used to tell my students when I would teach is, and this is the NCCOMs or now NCCBHM or whatever they're calling themselves right now, right? The acronyms are too much for me. Um, their exact verbiage is a minimal competency exam. You're in school to not kill someone and to be competent enough to perform this medicine. So it's perfectly fine to feel like a deer in the headlights when you get out of school and you feel like, oh my God, what can we do? But you go back to that minimal competency training. And then you say, where are my deficits? And you get better at it. So the onus is on you to just do what the medicine's always done. We excel at chronic care. We excel at seeing, hearing people. We excel at connecting with people. Just do that. Follow the stuff you've learned. And when you find a deficiency, get the training to no longer be minimally competent, but be good. I look back my first 5 years and, oh my God, I hope those patients never find me, you know, because like I was so bad at what I did, but I still was honest and we still got outcomes. But like that's the path of this medicine is no one wants the junior practitioner. They want the guy that's 85 years old, you know, hiding in a mountain wearing a robe, right? Why? Because he's done this for a while. So, you know, I think is trust the medicine. You know, my first mentor, one of the things he said is practitioners fail because they don't believe in the medicine. And I looked at it and I was like, what do you mean we don't believe in the medicine? We're here, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the medicine. And I've understood what he actually meant was that when push comes to shove, we don't really lean on the medicine. We immediately default to our pre-patterns and sets. Like, oh my God, I got to take a weekend course on some bullshit, whatever that someone's peddling that I think I can monetize. Instead of just saying, what does the classics say? Or what are the basics, my basic pattern discrimination, whatever you want to lean on, and just do good medicine. So we're like, oh, I got to now learn functional medicine. I got to learn this. And I'm not anti-functional medicine, but we sanfa, right? We scatter our chi into so many different places instead of consolidating and moving forward from a position of power. So how to answer that question is be upright, Jung, and move forward from a position of power, which means knowledge and understanding and confidence in the medicine. I don't know. And that's probably a segue of what my whole thinking in Chinese medicine is probably about.
I
That's probably nicer.
I'm completely enamored with your whole vibe. I think that you've got you've got like a Taoist punk kind of a energy to your approach and your perspective on things, and I think that there's something very appealing about that. I think that you're not usually when you think of like the archetypal TCM practitioner of old, the ancients that wrote our books or that where the history of the medicine comes from, we think of people that were essentially monks, like you said, that are very soft and kind of do no harm oriented in a soft way. But that's not the world that we live in, and being able to accept the challenges that are laid before us as they are and not take it personally and just understand that we have all of the answers. And even though this medicine wasn't written for this time, it absolutely applies, maybe even more so than it was. That if you can be centered in yourself and not be pushed off balance by all the things that are striving to do that every single day, then that's sort of where the truth lies and where the answers lie and where the healing comes from. So very cool. There's not really a question connected to that, but
No, I
I,
mean, medicine's a path of cultivation. And if we
yeah.
remember that, the friction is the part of the cultivation. There's no cultivation without friction, right?
Mhm.
So the challenges, and then when the classics say repeatedly in every classics that there's 3 levels of practitioner. The crappy low
Yeah.
level practitioner just does protocols, which
Yeah.
most of us are.
Yeah.
And because that's how we learn. And there's the
Right.
middle level, which is the one that gets about 80% of people better. And that means that it says the middle level practitioner is the person that studies, and goes back to the books constantly and just observes and tries to figure it out, which means
Yeah.
just try your darndest. That's it.
Yeah.
And then there's the spirit level practitioner is just magical. And we all,
Right.
but there's a
You can
caveat in
levitate.
there's a caveat in one of the commentaries. I think it's a Shanghai, but I may be wrong. And where it says, and this is like a 13th century commentary where it says like, you know, most practitioners think they're a spirit level practitioner when they're really the low level practitioner. And I was like, man, in the 13th century, they were saying that. And
Yeah.
it's still true today, right? Because we're all like, oh my God, I'm going to cure everyone with 1 point. I wish it was that easy. I've been trying. It's not working, you know?
Yeah. And well, maybe that opens up the next layer of questions where we are talking about the energetics a little bit. When you are working with the patient and you're putting hands on them, are you looking for needle sensation? Is there, are you pushing and pulling? Is there like a yi aspect to what you're doing, or are you just following protocols and coming up with combinations that are based on your interactions with them? How do you think the medicine is actually moving through them?
Well, the Nei Jing is very clear. It says that without the qi, there is no effect. So that's how I will answer it. Now, what is De Qi? Well, I'll leave that to the person to figure out what De Qi is, because I think it comes in many flavors and varieties. So there are sensations and there are things, and I also do a lot of dry needling, but my dry needling comes from like a sinew channel view and a biomechanical view. It's not just hurts here, stab it until it dies. That's really bad technique. Um, I'm not afraid for people to feel things, but there's also a value to subtle arts and there's subtle feelings. And then there's also, is Da Qi the feeling I feel? And the Zheng Zhui Da Cheng, the Great Compendium of Acupuncture, Max Western says that the arrival Qi and obtaining of Qi could feel like a fish biting on a hook. So is that, if I feel that there's a connection into the fascia or that as it wraps around the needle, okay, that's good enough. Additionally, sometimes, and not every patient, because I would probably be dead on the floor, I use chi-based needling techniques because that comes from my cultivation and the specific lineages that I've studied in, but I wouldn't say it's necessary, right? But
Mhm.
there are times through practices and cultivation where you learn certain things and they become useful, but I don't think it's required. I think that's just comes with time in the ranks. You you become more perceptive to sensations. I do a lot of channel palpation, a little pulse diagnosis, obviously. I don't use the tongue as much. I don't know. It's just me. It wasn't emphasized in my traditions, but I look at the tongue when I need to look at the tongue. But if you're coming in for pelvic floor pain, I probably ain't looking at your tongue. I want to know what's happening with the channels, and a lot of inquiry. So that's where I sit, but I also believe there's a lot of room for what treatment looks like, right?
Mhm.
Because, and this is the issue, we're talking about a modality and how it's applied to the body and how we should apply the modality. And I think that's the wrong question, right? But it's the thing that we have all the time. How should we be doing the acupuncture? No. How should we be leveraging the chi? How you choose to leverage the chi? Well, you could smack them across the face. And if that's the right level of chi, okay, then it moves the chi and they're fixed. And that's very, you know, reminds me of some things I've read in the classics, right? There, you can do anything. So if the right type of movement of their chi, if the chi is all raising up, if the chi is rising, the chi needs to go down. How you want to get the chi to go down, well, that's up to the practitioner. That's the art. So it might be lots of shallow, gentle needlings in the lower half of the body, which creates a perceptive sensation, and the chi will naturally gravitate down. It may be heavy anchoring Da Qi at liver 3 and call it a day. Well, they both work. But depending on the temperament of that person, well, one is right for the right person. So I think that's the skill of the practitioner. So I don't necessarily say, oh, you're the shallow, subtle, like gentle practitioner. That's bad. No, but you have to know the breadth of your techniques. I can do most. For my patient population, I tend to be heavy handed because I'm breaking up stagnation. Most of my patients are stagnation. So that's the nature of my techniques, but not everyone that has a lot of stagnation can necessarily handle it. So then, I'm not against electrostim. I do a lot of electrostim. So it really depends. But instead of saying, how does one apply to modality? And this is for every practitioner. It's not the modality, it's leveraging the chi. That's the main question. You can leverage the chi 900 different ways. There's a lot to be said for where your chi is in the treatment because the correction of chi is zheng versus xie, and the practitioner has to be more upright than the xie chi in that person. So if you can't control your chi during it and you can't make sure you understand what's going on, you're not going to move their chi in the right direction. So it starts in an internal sense and then everything comes out from that. It's the understanding of the nature first. That's what makes a good outcome. So I don't know. I use the needle how it needs to be used. I use the herbs how it needs to be used. And I tell them to maybe stop eating cheeseburgers. I love cheeseburgers personally, but the obvious usually plays out. Go to sleep on time and turn off the stupid phone. Very simple advice sometimes because
Yeah.
it's disrupting their chi.
Right. Right. Interesting. I just had somebody on the podcast last week that his name's Luhan Batus. He's not an acupuncturist. We also had an acupuncturist on the podcast, one of his students, but he teaches a movement system called Low Band Pi, and it's essentially an energy cultivation system.
Mhm.
And we were asking him about the energetics and the esoterics of acupuncture, and I was expecting more long-winded kind of answers about how energy is moved and how Jing is different than, Shen, and how Shen is different than Qi, and all of the different subcategories of Qi and all this kind of stuff. But his answer was much, much simpler, and you're alluding to that. And it's essentially that the uprightness, emanates from essentially a heart connectedness, that you have to have love for your patients, or at least compassion, and that if you're standing in a body that is uninhibited by essentially guilts or wrong behaviors that, or whether it's, lifestyle behaviors or, mental faculties that are irregular coping mechanisms or whatever you could extrapolate that out to, that those are the things that block our own chi. And if your job is to essentially ground people with your energy, and that there's, a wake to that there's a knock-on effect of your energy that moves energy in somebody else's body, then of course it starts in the heart, and that's where the focus should emanate from.
Mm.
That's not exactly what you said, but that's
No, no, it's the
that's what I
same.
got from it.
I mean, at the end of cultivation practices, we zame, we measure the beauty, right? We see everything through a child's eyes. And that's the same thing with the patient is you should see them for who they are, not for who you want to see them as. That's the cultivation that comes because then you can see the true chi. You can see where the dysfunction is. You can see how to leverage it. If you're applying your own filters, your own BS into the situation, your own dogma, whatever else, then I must needle in this way. I must whatever. I'm getting too old. Like I'm not interested. You know.
So I have a question. How I work with acupuncturists almost exclusively. I talk to a lot of people on the podcast and also just in my marketing efforts. And, I see patterns in the audience at large. And a lot of it is coming from a place of deficiency or scarcity or worry. I do marketing. So essentially these people need me to help them make money. And so maybe there's patterns because of that, for the practitioners that have money and are doing well, their energetic configuration is a little bit different. But I don't meet a lot of people like you that are so
Thank
grounded
God.
and well founded. No,
Be
but
insufferable if there was a lot of
no,
me.
but you have wisdom, and I'm not sure how common that is. The people that read the books are looking at a superficial layer of it, and there's a lot of lack of understanding that either comes from lack of experience or comes from maybe a cultural misalignment or something like that. I think that there's a big difference between reading the books and applying the protocols because you read the books and you're trying to intellectualize the process and the mechanics of what you're doing versus having lived experience of communing with people in a way where there's, energetic overflow between two entities or something like that. I know that sounds like woo. I'm
No,
definitely
but I
on the
mean,
woo
it's the
side of the
right
street,
way.
but
It's the right language set to express that. I don't have a Western way of saying that. You know.
yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how did you make it to the position that you're in? You're from New York, which is not famous for its spiritualism or spirituality or anything like that. You've had some nurture in Austin, it sounds like, and there's a lot of that here. But like, you come from a punk background, and you are a fascinating combination of things, and it's so naturally expressed and amalgamated into a cohesive kind of understanding of the art and the practice and the onus and, all of the things that should be kind of imbibed into this practice. So I'm curious, like, how did you not fall off the path, try to squeeze yourself, a round peg into a square hole? How did you not like lose your enamor with the art? How did you come to a place where you'd like an ancient master in a modern setting or something like that?
I mean, maybe I chose to reincarnate and this is my karma. I don't know. I haven't figured that one out. No, I mean, no, there's a simpler thing. I mean, I was, quote the late Gordon White. I was a weird kid and always has been. Right. And I had a very spiritual, like as a teenager, I had a lot of spiritual encounters and things that I was curious about. As you could probably tell by my conversation, I definitely have a training in the Eastern arts. I don't use it as a marketing thing, and I don't think spiritualism should be marketed. But I've trained and I've cultivated and I've had good teachers. Um, and I'm also a Western initiate for a long time, for good and for worse. But those things started like when I was young, like teenager, and so it's always been a part. And I lost myself. I was working at FIDI, and I was working for a commercial real estate transaction firm. And my sudden mentors, I was like 20, 21 years old. And I had a director's position because I was doing IT since I was like 15. Um, and that was like the day where like, if you had green hair, they like elevated you to like whatever, because, no one had training. It was a great time. And my mentors were all like Morgan Stanley, Lehman Brothers, dudes were making mills, right? But like finance bros, what we call them now. And these guys taught me a lot. They also taught me how to lose my soul.
Mm,
And I started noticing that. And I also, I had a strong nightlife, being in clubs and music scenes and being in bands and stuff. So I was burning the candle at both ends. And I was lucky for 9/11 to occur. Um, not at the moment, but it threw me back to saying like, I can't die like this, right? Like this is not, I'm not dying in a server room. Like I'm not doing this. I'm not like going and drinking at a strip club in the afternoon with a bunch of dudes as part of my life. Because as soon
mm,
as I turned 21, that was lunch. That was their
wow.
culture, right? And then, like, how do you function? Well, you use uppers, right? Like, that's not the life I wanted.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky to be shattered and also dealing with some health issues. Um, and Chinese medicine, I think, found me, um, and, helped me with a lot of my problems. And I was like, I'm going to do this because God's honest truth. I wanted to be, if you asked me at 15, I wanted to be a massage therapist and tarot card reader because I would read people's tarot cards constantly in school. And I had a massage therapist that was my mother's friend, and she did like med massage. And I thought that was fascinating because it like really helped with my back pains and stuff like that. So I was like, that's cool, but not a real career. Jokes on me, like, I guess, here we are. But, so I always had predilections towards it. And I think the universe gave me the right people at the right time. But I also had every time I found a teacher, I don't want to say abandon's the wrong word, but there was a time where it's like, okay, now you go do, right? Do it on your own. And I had to struggle and I had to decide if I wanted this. I always say that Chinese medicine has been my long-term mistress, right? Despite everything, it always keeps me excited, right? And it
Mhm.
has that kind of, this is probably not kosher, but like mistress chi. It's just exciting all the time. It's sexy. I don't get it. So it's there. Um, I could get bored. I remember I wrote a blog post one day. It was like a snowy day, I think. And I was reading through the Ben Salganmu, looking for something else, because I'm stupid and I buy the $300 books. And there was a whole chapter on wild women and prolapsed anuses and dog saliva. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, this is insane. And I wrote this whole blog post on my Substack because it was hysterical. And I'm like, how do you get bored of this? This is like incredible stuff. Like it's because there's no gatekeeping. There's no, like you can say like stuff is hidden. It's not hidden. You just have to do the work. It'll show itself. You don't need anything. Like there's no rule set you have to follow. Like that's made up by the practitioners. So I think in some ways, I mean, I've done the work. There's a lot more I should do. I've failed everything, failed martial artist, etc. But the medicine's sexy enough that I just keep showing up for more. The end, and I know
Love
that's
it.
probably not the right way to say it, but man, when you fall in love with this stuff, if you, like my teacher said, believe in the medicine because you know it's true, and I've seen enough where I'm like, I know this is true. I now have to understand why. It gives me the
Yeah.
reason to like, even on a shitty day, I'm like, yeah, well, that was probably caused by me. That my energy's off. I could change that today if I want, or I can continue to be grumpy and have stagnant chi and other people will continue to be shitty to me today. Or I can choose to change that. Suddenly your world becomes magical.
Yeah.
So that's how I've approached medicine. That's how I've approached business. It's and it goes back to that punk rock thing of where it's like very DIY. I'm doing this myself. I'm not asking for permission. So that's it. I don't know how to teach that, and I'm not saying my path was the right way because it was pretty effed up. Um, so
I mean, that was a pretty good sermon. I think. I think you just taught. I think people that's going to resonate with people. I have some things in common with you, and sometimes I wonder if this is how acupuncture finds people. It wasn't a 9/11 experience, but I literally was working at a cemetery for like 3 years. I was a family service counselor, which means that when somebody dies, they meet with a funeral director and me. I was on the cemetery side. I didn't deal with the bodies or anything like that, but I made sure they were interred in the right place and they had headstones and all that kind of stuff. And so at that point in my life, I was making terrible decisions. I was, dating the wrong people. I was um, fat and just depressed, and there was a moment. This sounds awful, but there was a moment where I was at a service that was like 3 hours long. It was a Mexican funeral, and the guy had died in an accident. He was a construction worker, and he fell to his death. And it's like August in Austin. I'm in Austin. I'm wearing a wool suit and sweating all the way through. Like I'd sweat through the jacket. The funeral director was from another funeral home, and I kept catching this smell of death. And at the end of the service, he said that the family wanted him to be interred with the clothes that he died in. And so he was holding a paper bag, and that's what I had been smelling for 3 hours. And that was the moment I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I need something in my life that is life affirming. Like this is not for me. And the next thing was I went to acupuncture school. And that was sort of
You know,
my,
my teacher in a similar way, because you talk about making bad choices, dating wrong people, through my Taoist teacher, through all cultivation and everything, would never tell me right or wrong, would not tell me anything. And I'd be like, I feel this. Oh, well, did you do that? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, this is why. It was allowed me to understand, but through that understanding, it validated.
mm.
Oh, well, when I do this thing, I feel shitty. Hmm. I'm not going to do that anymore. But if you told me not to do it, I would pursue it endlessly.
Right.
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 Um, so I think part of cultivation, I mean, I had a lot of stuff to refine, and I still do. And I think
Yeah.
part of it was I had to have a lot of messed up things happen and make really bad choices repeatedly until I understood it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
here we are.
That's one of yeah, that's one of the things that Luhan Matu said as well, is that the practitioners that are the best at what they do are the ones that have suffered the most.
Yeah,
So
I would say
there
that.
you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I'm not partial to
Oh,
Buddhism, so I'm not really big on the suffering. I decided that after like 2 years of like devout Buddhist meditation, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So
yeah, for sure. Okay, so maybe the next place that we could go to is about how you found success. I think that this is one of kind of the things that make people feel duped when they graduate. Is I don't know why we all enter into school imagining ourselves as a doctor at the end of it, as if we were going to work in hospitals, even though we know that's not necessarily the case. That's kind of how we approach it. And it's not until you're studying for your boards and you're realizing that the student loan money is going to stop coming, that you start to panic about how do you start a business? How do you sign a lease? What's the first thing? What am I going to call it? Like nobody is prepared to like embrace the identity of an entrepreneur practitioner. It's just not a thing. So how have you been able to figure it out and navigate that?
so um, I remember someone telling me, it's like, you graduate and you think you hang your little shingle outside that says, I'm open for business, and they're just going
Yeah.
to show up. And I
Yeah.
definitely believe that. And boy, did they not show up. you know, Realizing I knew nothing of marketing. We didn't have internet marketing back then. I mean, I created a website because I knew how, but like, I don't even
Mm,
know people were using websites really back then. And I was
right.
just like, okay, now what? Um, yeah, there was a lot of failure, and thankfully the world is a little different now. In my book, I lay out some things because I really think it's an individualized path, because clinician skills are not entrepreneurial skills, and you need to
Right.
decide if you want to learn those entrepreneurial skills and if that's actually where you're going to be happy. Because as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of uncertainty, and if you're looking for more certainty, then you should decide, maybe I want to be employed, and find out if that's viable in
Yeah.
your area.
Yeah.
I employ a lot of people in my practices. there are jobs, especially in New York City, we're seeing like chains pop up, which don't get me started, but at least there's jobs and there's careers.
Yeah.
Um, so you have to figure that out and then figure out what do you want because school, you come in with this idea, right? You're like, I'm going to do
Uh-huh.
X. This is what this is going to
Mhm.
be like. And then school teaches you TCM and here's everything you need to know. And you now have a different view because it's like, all right, it's going to be like the clinic. You might not be happy with that. Like if your vision, and I write about this in my book, if your vision was like to be like wearing a robe, banging a gong, and burning incense all day, and you're in a busy clinic in a white lab suit, the lab coat, like even though you're successful, you're going to be miserable inside because you just want to bang the gong and be that esoteric weirdo, which is not a value judgment, but it's just a thing, right?
Sure.
You have to be in harmonize. You have to harmonize with what you want. So you have to figure out what you want first. Then you have to like reality check it. Is that something that can be monetized? Because, and I think this is the biggest issue is school teaches you to be a generalist, which is perfectly fine. You're like a GP of Chinese medicine. Um, Marketing a GP is weird, and I was talking to someone recently because there's no USP, right? There's not like, what's your angle? How do you differentiate? I do the acupuncture thing. I poke you with needles. You should come see me. That's not exciting, right? I was talking to someone who's like, oh, I think, focus on women's health. And I'm like, yeah, you and every single woman that I've ever met wants to do women's health because it's related to you. It's a lived experience. But I was like, what about women's health? And we went through it. I was like, what excites you? And I kept going, going, going. And then I realized she's really interested in metabolic health and PCOS. And I said, there's your angle. Suddenly now, because if I go on everyone's, even guys, everyone's like, I do women's health, I do menstrual regulation, I do diet, I do weight loss, you do everything. Or worse, you take that WHO list and you say, acupuncture is good for these things. I've done that, right? And you're like, therefore I do all these things. Do you? Do you do all those things well? Right? Because if you can't get the outcome, no one wants to buy a shitty product. The end of the day, and I'm like a little mean, but it's really the Taoist thing, is I don't want you to waste time. I want you to succeed. Do the thing that excites you and do the thing you do well, right? So when you narrow it down, and in that case, it's like PCOS and metabolic issues for women, now you become very marketable because now you know where your marketing is coming from. Now you know what your referral network looks like. Now you know what your elevator pitch is and how you're communicating yourself. As opposed to, I'm an acupuncturist. I used to fucking hate saying I'm an acupuncturist. I was embarrassed from my peers. And every time I said, it's like, oh my God, I do that. It's so relaxing. I love it. Cool. That's not the experience with me, right? I'm not relaxing. You can tell by my chi, I can relax you, but that's not what I want to treat, right? I was like, oh, wow. I knew immediately that there was a friction between their image of what I do versus, like what I actually do. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. My branding's off. My communication's off. So when you get out there and you want to succeed, what do you want to do? And I truly mean that. What does it mean to succeed? What does it mean to be an acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist, whatever the hell you want to call yourself, healer? I don't care, right? Whatever that brand that you want to create, what are you actually doing? Because if you're just a GP, then you better communicate that you are the best generalist in the world and you have the best referral network for when things get complicated. That's what makes a GP. Not, I'm going to do everything and I promise you outcome on everything, because you can't do that. And the classics are clear on that. It's just not going to work, right? So what are you good at? What excites you? And chase those patients. Because at the end of the day, the business of medicine is outcome driven. It's not a thing you're peddling. Right. So there's a different thing. If you can't get people better, you're not going to succeed. And maybe you can, but if you can't communicate effectively, you don't know what that treatment plan is. You don't know how to modulate and change the treatment plan and communicate why it's changing, which my book talks about, Thinking Chinese Medicine, Buy It. All that stuff, then they're not going to stay long enough to get better. So even if you
Right.
are good, right? If you don't stay in your lane, and that's like my word right now. It's like people ask me things. I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but I stay in my lane. Because people are like, oh, can you also do that? Yeah, I can, but I stay in my lane. Mostly because my practice is so busy. I don't have time to do the other thing because I'm structured in one way now. That I mentally can't be like, okay, and now I'm going to worry about your digestion. I don't care. Go see Peter. He's in my office. He's phenomenal. And he will do that stuff. And when you have pelvic issues and urination issues, Peter's going to send you to me. Right. I mean, I also like to joke is I'm the Ren 1 king now. So like, no one wants to do that. I'm Ren 1 all day. So it's like, I stay in my lane.
Yeah.
But I could communicate effectively in my lane where I don't actually communicate that well if I'm talking about the things I don't do day in, day out.
That's great. That's like, I think that's foundation of what's necessary. I think when, as soon as we start talking about marketing and what everything that comes with that, branding and messaging and platforms and all of the things, it is such an energy suck for everybody. And there's technical overwhelm with all the tools now when we're in the era of AI. God help us. Everybody is scared that it's gonna be an existential crisis for humanity. And ultimately, we're just talking
I'm
about
super
teaching.
bullish on AI, but I agree. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about creating something that knows all your answers to the questions, that can have conversations that you're not having on your behalf, that's a whole different thing. But uh, that's not where I meant to go. Where I meant to go is just that, yeah, knowing yourself and what actually fills you with energy, gives you energy. That's of course the first thing. But once they start to settle on that, then in terms of the logistics and the mechanics of actually getting people to come through the door, what do you advocate for with regard to that?
Two things. Do you have money or do you have time?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't have money, but you have time, you need to get your ass out there. You need to network. You need to meet people because now you know how to communicate what you do. People ask me what I do. Oh, I treat pelvic floor dysfunction. Oh, how? Oh, through dry needling, neuromodulation, acupuncture, herbal medicine, etc. Right? Because I'm leading with what I do because that's matching the problem I solve. Acupuncture doesn't match the problem that they're trying to solve, right? It's the tool. And it goes back to our early conversations like, well, I leverage chi. So I solve a problem using a bunch of tools. So you figured it out, you have the brand. If you have time, you need to be networking, you need to be talking to people. A chiropractor I know who split from her, like she was in one of those like larger chiropractic groups. She went on her own, a Webster chiropractor. So she focuses on like a lot of pregnancy stuff and whatever. So I'm like, oh, there's that USP. That's great. Literally spent her day walking to every single freaking office that looked remotely medical, coming in, saying hello, dropping off her cards, following up constantly. And her practice was full in about 6 months. And it took 6 months because she didn't give up. But people started to know her because she kept showing up like clockwork because she had time. If you have money, you hire good marketers. And for me, my focus is like out the gate, it's SEM paid because it might be a higher conversion factor, but it's going to bring people in the door. And you have money, you bring them in the door. Then you could lower that cost per click, lower that spend, and you could look at more of that organic SEO and now GEO. But that takes time for it to understand you, right? So you can't do it. Otherwise, if you have time, you should be writing your own blogs or working with people that can advise you on doing your SEO stuff because it can get very expensive, but it's going to take a long time. But you should be writing on the things you do, right? Because you are an expert and you just profess that you actually like it and you get energy from doing it. So it shouldn't be that hard, right? And you're learning because you have time. So that's the bridge. Do you have time or do you have money? Because if you have money, you pay people to do the things because that's the fastest way. If you don't have money, which is 95% of the people, you have time. And that's where I see most of the students fail because they've got the time, they don't have the money, and they're, for lack of a better word, they're dicking off on social media. They're playing around, they're going to parties, they're, hanging out with their friends, or they're going on vacations because they're living their best life. Well, how do you build a practice when your chi isn't focused on building a freaking practice? It's scattershot sci-fi, right? It makes no freaking sense.
Yeah.
So it's brass tacks. It's the medicine. Believe in the medicine and you succeed. The end. So that's what I would say.
All right. Well, that that brings us to the top of the hour. We've been round the bend. I think your answers are excellent. I've loved this conversation. And it's always exciting when I get it. I try to get some kind of take on who you are and what you're about and what your experience is from the interwebs primarily, or conversations that we had on Facebook or whatever. But you never know what you're going to find until you actually have a conversation. It's been very cool, and I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did. So
I hope whatever stuff they said, if it was even remotely jarring, helps you treat people and make them better, because that's the core
yeah,
purpose, and that's been the
yeah,
mantra forever, is at the end of the day, my sole purpose is treat the people, make them better,
yeah,
and my marketing, my businesses, and everything else is for that outcome, and that outcome is circular. It will make you more successful when you treat
yeah,
people and you get them better. So
right.
then you just figure out how to do that, which for me took years of failure and wasted money. But eventually now it's like formulaic. I mean, it just as an aside, it's like an encouragement. I know we're at the top of the hour. It's like, right now I have 4 practices out on Long Island that had been running for a while. At one point I had 9. I don't recommend that to anyone. And then I have a cash-based practice on the Upper West Side in New York where I practice. And I took that cash-based practice from 0 patients, and in 8 months' time, it was full and is making high 6 figures. So it is not hard when you have the right positioning, the right messaging, and the right team. Now, I did have money at that time to do it. I didn't have time, but it is doable. And I think the thing to say is, like, when you look at the last, the ASA did, I think the average acupuncture is making 60K. And that was
Yeah,
2000 right before COVID.
yeah,
Um, if you're happy at 60, that's fine. Like, money is up to you, right? Things are much more expensive. I think it costs 60K to put gas in my car.
yeah.
So, like, right now, you can achieve whatever you want in this medicine if it's in line with what you actually want. To make really big money, you're going to work a lot. Maybe you don't want to work a lot. That's fine. It's not a value judgment. But just make sure everything makes sense and you could achieve it. This medicine has been around for thousands of years, treating people and making them better. You can do that too if you'd like to. That's what else.
Amen.
That's what else.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. It's been an excellent podcast. If you guys want to connect with Jordan, you can find him online. He said his books are sold everywhere. So just have a
Except
little
in
Google.
stores.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So, all right. We'll catch everybody on the next one. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.